Now, Krasner and Rankow's laws of axis opening to be continued. Yesterday we have read about law of centrality, law of concentricity, law of CEJ, and now today we will be teaching about law of symmetry 1, law of symmetry 2, law of color change, law of orifices location 1 and law of orifices location 2 and 3. Law of symmetry 1, what does it say? Except for maxillary molars, the orifices of the canal are equidistant from a line drawn in a mesiodistal direction through the pulp chamber floor. So, this is the maxillary molar. This is maxillary first premolar, maxillary first premolar. This is maxillary second premolar, maxillary second premolar. Except for maxillary molars are an exception. The orifices of the canal, these are the orifices of the canal. Orifice, and this is orifice. The orifices of the canal are equidistant from a line when we draw a line running mesiodistally through the pulp chamber floor. Except for maxillary molars, when we draw a line for the maxillary molars, the orifices will not lie equidistant from the line drawn through the pulp chamber floor. And when we talk about the maxillary first and second molar, the orifice of the canal is at equidistance from the line drawn through mesiodistal direction. So, this is orifice 1, orifice 2 and orifice 3, and all the orifices are at equidistance from the line drawn through mesiodistal direction. And in maxillary second premolar, these orifices are also at equidistance from a line drawn through mesiodistal direction. What does law of symmetry second say? It says that except for maxillary molars are exception here also in law of symmetry 2. These maxillary molars are exception of law of symmetry 1 and 2. Law of symmetry 1 and 2. Law of symmetry 2. Except for maxillary molars, the orifices of the canal lie on a perpendicular to a line drawn in a mesiodistal direction across the center of the floor of the pulp chamber. These are the orifices of the canal of the maxillary first molar. So, the maxillary molar is an exception over here, and when we talk about other tooth, any other tooth except maxillary molars, the orifices of the canals lie on a perpendicular to a line drawn in a mesiodistal direction. This is the mesial direction and this is the distal direction, and we have drawn a line. So, this is orifice 1 and it is lying at perpendicular to the line drawn in a mesiodistal direction, and it is also lying perpendicular to the line drawn in a mesiodistal direction. Perpendicular means 90 degree, and this is the line drawn in a mesiodistal direction and this is the orifice of the canal. So the law of symmetry 2 says that except for maxillary molars, the orifices of the canals lie on a perpendicular to a line drawn in a mesodistal direction across the center of the floor of the pulp chamber. Here we are talking about the center of the floor. The line we are drawing in a mesodistal direction should also pass through the center of the pulp chamber. This line should not pass through any other region of the pulp chamber. The line should always pass through the center of the pulp chamber and in a mesodistal direction. And now the law of color change. The color of the pulp chamber floor is always darker than the walls. So the floor of the pulp chamber is grey in color and the root canal orifice is dark grey or black. So we can distinguish that we have reached towards the canal orifice. Now the law of orifices location 1. The orifices of the root canals are always located at the junction of the walls and the floor. This is the wall of the pulp chamber, and here it could be the floor of the pulp chamber, and this is roof of the pulp chamber, roof of pulp chamber. This is the roof of the pulp chamber, this is the floor of the pulp chamber, and this is the wall of the pulp chamber. So the orifice of the root canals are always located at the junction of the walls and the floor. So this is the wall and this is the floor, and the orifice will lie at the junction of the floor and the wall. This is the junction where the floor and the wall is meeting, so the canal orifice will lie over here. And the law of orifice location 2, the orifices of the root canals are located at the right angles in the floor wall direction. So it is also forming a right angle over here. This is the wall, this is the orifice, this is floor of the root canal, and this is orifice. This is orifice, this is wall of the pulp chamber, and this is the floor of the pulp chamber, and this is orifice. And the law of orifices location 3. The orifices of the root canals are located at the terminus of the root developmental fusion line. So in embryonic stage, the crown of the tooth develops first, and after the eruption of the tooth, the root portion of the tooth develops. So the orifice will lie at the terminus of the root developmental fusion line. So we are talking over here about embryonic stage development of tooth. So this is about embryonic development of the tooth. So according to the law of orifice location 3, the orifice of the root canals are located at the terminus of the root developmental fusion lines. Now the color of the enamel should appear as white, and of dentine appears yellow, and the floor of the pulp chamber appears grey, and the root canal orifice appears grey dark, and the pulp stones appears purely white or dark yellow in color.